when you go to see practitioners, you get a subjective point of view. So conventional medicine and alternative medicine is guilty of the same practice. So what happened was I kept getting sicker. And about 8 years into that journey, I was told at 28 that I would never have a period again, that I'd gone into early menopause, I'd never have other children, I'd have to go into part-time work or not work at all. And I couldn't understand with my mind how that could be possible for a 28-year-old, otherwise healthy individual. It just didn't seem to make sense to me. Around that time, I met a practitioner who is now passed on. She was my teacher and she was my doctor, and she saved my life. A lady called Dr. Jessica Rand. Everything that I'm going to share with you this evening, I first learned from her. So she taught me that it's actually possible for us to communicate with our bodies, and our bodies can tell us what's wrong. So then you're not relying on the latest trend or the latest subjective opinion. Your body can tell you what it needs to get well. So it actually, when in meeting her, I actually learned this to be very true, is that your cure is within you, but you don't sense it because we don't know how to get the information out from our bodies anymore. We've lost that innate wisdom. Your sickness is from you, but you don't see it. And actually, in my case, what was making me sick was the way I was living my life and the environment I was living my life in. And you consider yourself small, and yet you encapsulate the whole universe. And what I mean by that is we are from the world, to the world, and of the world. It's where we go back. We're not separate to creation or the rest of nature. So in understanding that we are of the universe, then the laws of physics and the laws of energy that apply to the universe equally apply to us. And yet modern medicine and healing is primarily concerned with biochemistry, which is the chemistry of the human body, which encompasses elements of energy, but it doesn't take physics into the equation. So essentially, like I said, we're part of nature, and as a result, the laws of nature apply to us. But what does that mean for healing? It basically means that we need to acknowledge that just as the cycles of nature, the cycles of energy, and everything that we see operating in the world around us regulates nature, it also regulates us. So everybody who stayed up too late one night can attest to the fact that the next morning doesn't feel so great. But have you ever asked yourself why? Like, is it just the amount of sleep you got, or is it also when you slept and how you slept? Because a lot of this is actually to do with syncing our circadian rhythms to the cycles of night and day. And that's why, as an example, in traditional societies, leaning on our tradition for this example, people slept after Isha and they got up at Fajr. A lot of the time that didn't equal 8 hours sleep, and yet they had all of the energy they needed to live meaningful, fulfilling, and purposeful lives. The reason for it was they were leveraging the Earth's cycles for their energetic balance. They were taking from the energies Earth and using it in a way that they could then challenge for their own energetic reserves. So in us getting out of sync, we get sick. It's that simple. So I wanted to speak about how can we take what I just took as a fact, right? Energy comes first. I find this really, really fascinating, right? Everything alive has energy. Everything, right? Every single thing in creation, if it's alive, it has energy. So in a way, we can't really speak about life being healthful, purposeful, fulfilling, meaningful, if we don't use energy as part of the equation. Like, I often deal with people who have, for example, depression, right? And a lot of the time they say to me, I feel flat. I don't feel like I have energy. And then the first thing I ask a lot of people is, well, how's your sleep? And then I figure out that actually they're sleeping way too late and getting up either too early or getting up past the optimal wake-up times for our circadian rhythms. And getting out of sync in that way depletes our energy. Energy is needed for all rest, rejuvenation, and repair. So what happens is if you're draining your energy, you're actually draining your body's ability to heal itself. So you have to get energy and put energy in for your body to be able to do the functions that it requires to do. Part of that is endocrine, part of that is immune, part of that is emotional. The whole thing hinges on you having enough energy. So I find this really interesting because, again, going back to our tradition, we believe that everything comes from the mulk into the malakut, right? So everything comes from the energetic domain first. And actually, that's true in physics as well, in that everything manifests in an energetic dimension before it manifests in a physical dimension. So when we think about it from that perspective, we realize that we actually have an energy body that animates our physical body, right? And in a way, we have to take it into consideration the same way that we would take in consideration some things like food and drink for our physical body, because we actually get energy that builds up our energetic body. And why that's important is because it's like, I always say, think Lego, right? The energetic body is basically the conductor of the orchestra or the foreman of the construction site. So I always say, if you got like 2 5-year-old children and you gave them Lego and you didn't give them any instructions, what they'd build, even if you gave them the exact number of blocks, exact color of blocks, exact shape of blocks, they'll build 2 things that look completely different. And that's because there's no instructions. The template for what your cells create is provided by the energetic body. So what that means is we need to tend to that body as well in order for the physical body to be sound and to be healthful and well organized. And on that front, and this is kind of like the thread that I wanted to weave through today's talk, is like what modern society fails to sort of tell us openly is that everything in our environment is communicating with us. So everything is energy before it's matter. Every single thing is energy before it's matter. Everything has its own energetic signature in creation so long as it's alive, right? So the question is, when we live in a world that is man-made, largely man-made, it emits energy as well. But how does that energy communicate with us? And are we actually responding to it? Can it influence our physiology, our emotions, our endocrine rhythms? The answer is yes. And that surprises a lot of people because we don't necessarily see us as being innately in conversation with our environment when actually we are, for the better and the worse. So this is what we're talking about here when we say our entire environment communicates with our body. And essentially we are electromagnetic beings. We're part electricity, part magnets. And obviously, Asma, you and I have spoken about this on-off, is that a lot of modern technology is built on electromagnetic emissions. So if we are an electromagnetic energy body, how do we interact and interplay with the technology that is around us in everyday life? Because if any one of you pulled up your phones now and looked at how many wireless connections you can connect to on Wi-Fi, I would hazard a bet you have at least 6 or 7 options, right? But when you have that many different sources of electromagnetic influences communicating with your body, the question that I wanted to pose is, who is interacting with who? Who is in training to who? Because we're designed as human beings to sync, right? That's what communities are, that's what souls are, that's what everything is. You get like onto like and you sync, but the more dominant the energetic source, the more likely it is to be the source that you sync to. The problem that we have is that with the advent of modern technology, we're not sometimes consciously aware that our physiology has made that choice, right? So I think if we go on to some of the examples here, everything in creation that's alive has an electromagnetic field, right? And we see that in modern medicine. It's acknowledged by modern medicine, which is why you have ECGs and EEGs that monitor and can tell you the health of certain organs depending on the strength of the electromagnetic frequency that's emitted and the phase like that it takes, the wave that it creates. So what they're doing is they're measuring the emission to be able to ascertain how healthy and strong certain organs are, right? The earth, nature, everything that is alive also creates an electromagnetic field. The difference is that there's one major difference between man-made and non-man-made. Modern devices have what we call a pulsed electromagnetic field, which basically means it's constantly pulsing and it spikes as well. Go ahead. So, for example, man-made would be like your cell phones and your Wi-Fi and your baby monitors, things like that. Living, I was going to go on to the Earth, is a perfect example because the Earth has an electromagnetic resonance called the Schumann resonance. And again, it fluctuates, but it doesn't pulse and it doesn't go into such big spikes. The stress it causes on our body is so much less, but not just that, it's actually set at a frequency that engenders repair, restoration, and rejuvenation. So that's why today, in today's world, when you go to a lot of functional medicine doctors, they'll tell you to go and grind. How many people have seen doctors who'll tell them, go to the beach, walk with bare feet, see the sand, feel the water? The reason for that is that the electromagnetic frequency of the world, the Schumann resonance, basically allows you to then exchange ions between you and the world, and it also creates an entrainment effect. So one of the best ways, and we'll deal with this later, but one of the best ways to deal with getting rid of the harmful effects of wireless technology in the modern world is grounding. It's to walk with bare feet on the surface of the earth. And the reason is that the positive ions that are generated in the body as a result of the accumulation of the electromagnetic charge from the wireless devices is then actually rooted into the ground and conducted into the surface of the ground and exchanged for negative ions, which is what engenders health, restoration, and rejuvenation. So looking at this, right, these are obviously some of the examples of wireless devices that we're exposed to on an almost daily level. But the thing is this quote is from Nicholas Tesla. Like, our entire biological system, the brain and the earth itself, works on the same frequency because we were created from nature. So then it's kind of like we were given the frequency that we need to be able to like restore ourselves, reset ourselves, and keep ourselves in good health. But actually, with the creation of these devices, where we haven't thought about the impact that they have on the human bodies that are in their field, we're allowing a distortive field to come in. So what I wanted to do, because I really don't believe in doom and gloom, like that's not what I'm about at all. I don't want you to feel like the whole world's out to get you. I don't want you to go home and be panicking about all the different sources. Instead, what I wanted to do is just create some awareness that, like, with energy comes information, with information comes communication. So every day in your life, what are you syncing yourself with, right? Because you do have a choice. You do have a choice, number one. And number two, what are some of the things that you can do that are free and easy for you to be able to instill as good hygiene when dealing with an increasingly electromagnetic world? Okay. By the way, I'm happy to take questions as they come up, so feel free to do that.
You mentioned entrainment.
Yeah, so entrainment is, it'll come up in this as well, but it's basically, say you go into a room and there are lots and lots and lots of different clocks. What happens is the clock, and I'm talking like back in the day, pendulum clocks, what happens is when you go into that room, the clock with the most dominant like electromagnetic emission will cause the other clocks to sync with it. And that's called the entrainment effect. So what happens is that when you're in an environment, the strongest signal is the signal that your body will almost like give way to and cause like a subsistence towards. Yeah? So we covered this already. Think of energy as information exchange, because that's exactly what it is. It's about exchanging information. So wireless technology produces EMF emissions, and as you can see, this really clearly explains it. What you see is before the cell phone use, the cells are not as hot. After the cell phone use, the cells are hot. They've heated up because EMFs are microwaves. They're literally exactly the same as your microwaves, but on a less strong basis. But with an accumulation of exposure, they produce the same result. So the red here is literally the cells being cooked, to put it in layman's language. So what we know at a most basic level, and this, by the way, is not just pseudoscience, this is what even conventional medicine agrees on now, is that EMFs are neurological exciters, which is why, for example, France, one of the reasons why France has banned them from schools, because they've actually seen an increase with ADHD and attention deficit disorders linked with the fact that people can't focus. Why? Because the brain's being physically excited, and it's so much harder to focus when you are excited. The other thing is that it distorts the signaling of cell membranes. So we know that it floods cells with potassium. We know that it floods cells with calcium. What that means is that the minerals are not being exchanged properly inside and outside of the cells. And we know for a fact that where there is no mineral and vitamin balance, there is no health. Taking it back to biochemistry. It disrupts energy production, which is why I think it's really interesting that they say that the diseases of the modern affluent world are energy diseases. I think that's really interesting. It's been linked to infertility, which is why last year in the US, birth rate dropped 3% in 1 year. And they're now saying in America that 1 in 6 couples of childbearing age can't bear children without intervention, which is really scary. And that's why now clinics like the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, the American Academy of Pediatrics are all citing like EMF hygiene as one of the factors they have to consider before people do things like IVF as an example. And then the other thing is, this one is the one that I find the scariest, is digital dementia. There's now a disease called digital dementia, and it affects children because it actually changes the wiring and the growth of the human brain while it's still developing. Irrevocably, you can't change it back. So the scary thing for that about me is that it actually underdevelops the right lobe. So they lose memory, they don't know how to do empathy, they can't do human connection. And it's, they basically become non-empathetic, non-expressive, which is why, you know, even if you don't necessarily subscribe to the views that I've shared about the electromagnetic frequency, it's really, really, really important that screen time is timed for children. I can't stress that fact enough. But what I wanted to do here is, like, you can like tap the screen or I can share it, but essentially this is just like essentially snapshotted from the Environmental Health Trust. It's literally one of the best websites for all of this. I'm going to share resources on the next slide, but as you can see, France, Israel, Switzerland, India, Cyprus, there's a whole list of countries that have actually introduced regulation around either the length of exposure, the strength of exposure, or limiting or excluding the source completely in schools and universities. I have 1 minute left, so I'm going to try and cram this in as quickly as I can. But this is literally just like a quick checklist that I wanted to be able to give you, because this is completely free, doesn't require you to expend money on products, and is based on scientific research. Distance is your friend. With Wi-Fi, with cell phones, with living next to mobile phone masts, distance is your friend. With mobile phone masts, try to be at least 400 meters away from the nearest mast. With Wi-Fi, please don't sleep next to walls that have Wi-Fis. Try and keep them as far away in your house as possible. And please always make sure that you switch your Wi-Fi off at night if you're not prepared to move on to wired access alone. Don't use your cell phone when signal is weak. Your phone has to work up to 10 times harder in order to maintain the connection. So it's just a no-go. If you don't have like 3 bars, don't use it. Don't carry your phone on your body. Believe it or not, the safety guidelines are based on devices held 10 meters away from the body. So if you actually read your manufacturer's handbook for how to use your device, it doesn't ever anticipate that you will hold the device next to your phone, because the thinnest part of the human skull is the temple. So what you're actually doing is you're allowing it free rein into your brain. Don't sleep with your phone next to you while it's charging. It's a neuroexciter. You won't be able to sleep. It will screw your circadian rhythms. So make sure it's always on wireless if you're going to use it as an alarm clock, and never charge it next to your bed or your bedroom, period. Use corded landlines. If you don't, they will go extinct. They will be removed, because business is a supply and demand business. That's how it's formatted. If you don't use it, they won't make it available, but this will protect you. And don't use no-ha-nos. Yeah.
Also, like cordless phones that are.
Yeah, no, everything has to be corded into the headpiece.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't use your phones in confined metal spaces, cars, elevators, trains, anything like that, because essentially it's harder for the signal to get through metal, so it has to work harder, which increases your exposure, which increases the damage you're exposing yourself to. The other thing is like, obviously, as one of the lines of my business is I do make diodes and other protective devices available, but one thing that I will make everybody to attest to is that they don't eradicate the harm. They might make it safer for you to use your phone when you need to, but they don't eradicate the harm. So there's no reason to think that a diode or anything else that you use is going to completely protect you. And this is about screen time, because EMFs is one thing, but actually the way a human brain responds to a screen changes the way that human brain grows in children. So empathy is created in real life scenarios, not with electronic screens. So it's really important that you time the exposure. The last thing I wanted to share is the best resources. These are the ones that I use for all of my work. The Environmental Health Trust is co-founded by Dr. Deborah Davis. She is an exceptional woman. She was actually, she's been, I think, a health advisor to 2 presidents in the last 20 years. She's not a quack at all by any stretch of the imagination. She actually specialized in environmental oncology, and that's what led her into this field, trying to help people and change policy to make exposure safer. Yeah, Dr. Deborah Davies. She actually recently did a TED Talk, which was Rapid Fire. I think it was called Rapid Fire, What Sperm and Brain Cells Have in Common. And she was talking about the links or the similarities in the progression of dementia and other brain-related diseases and infertility. Parents for Safe Technology. For the parents in the audience, it's an invaluable website. I think one of the things I really want to explore, although I don't really know quite how to do it, is that in this country I've noticed that there are a lot of mobile phone masts right next to schools. And that's something that Europe and the UK and to a certain extent Canada are completely moving away from because of the effect it has on the children. So how can we help raise awareness of what the impact might be on the children there? Now, Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, for me, is a personal hero. He is one of the most impressive functional medicine doctors I have ever come across in my entire life. He's the co-founder of the Sophia Institute, and he also has an academy online called the Klinghardt Academy. I have never found any fault in any of the information that he's shared. So if you wanted a source of golden truth, it's that. If you're looking to do some of the digging and you want access to the scientific information behind it, between him and Dr. Deborah, you're covered. It's called the Klinghardt Academy, and his name is Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt. And lastly, the book for the layman that I recommend is a book called The Tinfoil Guide to EMFs, and it's by a man called Nicolas Pineau. I think he's Canadian-French. And he does an online course as well, which I did, so I'm a trained practitioner with him, and I'm in touch with him to try and do something that we can host as a community here. So hopefully I can do something about that soon. Go ahead.
EMF, what is it?
Electromagnetic frequency.
And what's the diode?
A diode is, so actually Lila, we've spoken about this before. You can get some stick-ons that you can attach to your phone. And the idea is that they temper the emission so that it's less erratic and less kind of fluctuating to extremes to take the edge off the exposure. Go ahead.
Can you, by any chance, I don't know, share this last slide with us?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Either in a WhatsApp group?
Yeah, I'm very happy to. Yeah. Go ahead.
What would you recommend as an amount of time for grounding per day?
Ideally, okay, so the ideal, although from the people I was talking to earlier, I'll share this, right? The reason why I don't really like to share ideals is people take them as a given, and then that stops them doing them if they can't get the ideal in, because we're all a little bit sort of inclined towards perfectionism, shall we say. But the ideal is 30 minutes, right? But the thing that I can say with grounding is even if you only get 1 minute, that 1 minute makes a difference. Are there any other questions? Yeah. And the thing is, I know a lot of us don't live next to the sea. It doesn't have to be at the beach. All you need is where your bare foot is touching the surface of the earth. So that can be grass, it can be sand, it can be cement for those of us that live in cities. So long as it's foot on ground, it works. You can even touch trees because trees are grounded. So what you do is you're tapping into the tree and the tree does the exchange for you. Go ahead.
What about people that mentioned speed limit on the ground?
Yeah.
They talk about the islands on the ground.
Yeah. Sleeping on the ground? Yeah. There's actually, one of the things I do, I actually have a grounding sheet in my house. So my bed sheet is grounded. So I ground through the nights, which I love. And it's just an example of how you can use. It's through the electrics. So basically it's plugged into the electric socket and it does the exchange through the, it's like a metal sheet that's stitched into it. It's brilliant. The thing is, right, I wouldn't rush to that. The reason why I use it is because my official diagnosis, although Dad knows that I threw it out the window and never bought into it, was ME, which is chronic fatigue. So for me, I generally, like what I'm sharing with you is kind of like the good hygiene that's needed for an able-bodied, healthy, sort of youthful person. But those of us that deal with autoimmune issues or that are sort of further on in life, we do need to take a bit more care. And that's fine. I'm happy to do that. It keeps me on my feet and it gave me my life back. So, but yeah, a lot of these, to answer your question, what I'm trying to do, and please pray for me because I really need all the support I can get on this front, is that the products and the knowledge that helped me, what I want to do is to make it available. So I'm in the middle of setting up a lifestyle website because the thing is, I actually lost a lot of money in the process because a lot of it is not legit or not good enough and it breaks and, it's just been a mess. But anyway, there are some really, really good product, really, really good science behind them. Those are the ones that are worth making available. But a lot of it is about making what they are understood to border control to get the licenses for them to be able to clear the port. So I'm trying to start small and figure it out, but obviously like prayers and du'as would really help. So if it's something that you think you'd benefit of, pray for me.
So what I'm understanding is it's all about energy exchange. And
Yeah.
allowing everyone to exchange energy with the world and each other.
Yeah.
More efficiently. But how can I be seeing that grounding?
Yeah.
What other sort of practical things can you sort of maybe start us off? Like give us a little, are there any sort of practical things we can start doing?
Can I speak freely about this one? Because I don't know who's in the audience, but I'll share one of the best, and I'll share others that aren't to do with faith. But the best is to have the Quran in your environment. It reprograms the entire energy in the home. It's an entrainment effect. So the vibrations that it causes structures the cells differently. And so what happens is your cells entrain to the vibration of the Quran, which changes your physiology. And it changes the environments and energies that are actually permitted inside your home. So one of the best is use the Quran and have it in your environment and make that the backdrop to your life. No, the sound. Because all energy can be healing or detrimental, right? And obviously, one of the forms of energy is sound. So sound can have a healing effect, and that's why things like vibrations can cause healing. But obviously, what I think is beautiful about the Quran is when you read it properly, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, it causes a frequency and a vibration that your body entrains to.
That's like the Tibetan singing bowls.
Exactly. And you'll find it in every tradition. Yeah, you'll find it in, and that's why for me, like I use the Quran because I also want to expose my children to it, but the other thing that I use is the hang drum. Because the hang drum, there's a thing called the hang drum, or you can use meditation music. Essentially, any of that type of frequency will have a similar effect. But for me, I try to root as much as I can in my own spirituality because it kills two birds with one stone. Go ahead. Yeah.
Which one better than to leave yourself on the water? For example, my voice is not a good voice. Or I use the Quran on the water, not by me, by Abdul Basit, for example, and after that, I drink the...
But you know the answer to this question, because what you have that the recording doesn't is intention. And the intention is tantamount. It means so much. So the fact that you can use it, in addition, has additional barakah. The field is called biophysics, and the derivative science or modality of treatment is called bioenergy. Yeah.
Scientifically,
Yeah.
you have all this data.
Yeah. Yeah. This science isn't new, by the way. It actually existed like in the late 19th century, and it became prevalent in the 20th century, but with the rise of the world wars, it was shelved. And basically then money wasn't diverted into it. But if you actually go back to like the 1920s, a lot of the breakthroughs came from scientists that preceded Einstein. And then Einstein and others built on their work. So what's really interesting is, like, for me, the scientists that I'm like in awe of, you know, they are heroes to me, existing today, include Professor Luc Montagnier, who is in his, if I'm not mistaken, late 80s, and he's a Nobel laureate. Professor Brian Josephson from Cambridge University is just a phenomenal human being. He won his Nobel laureate in 1974. Tesla is doing his own thing, but the problem with Tesla is he's not grounding. But a lot of it, Nicholas Tesla, yes, but like Tesla, the car. No, Nicholas Tesla is like a don, basically, right? But another one that, by the way, just to share, and my dad, I think, is what you're alluding to, and my dad read his book recently, I got it from my dad, Professor Jared Pollack. He's one of the foremost scientists that are studying water as a cure and water science, and he recently wrote a book called The Fourth Phase of Water, which talks about structured water. So they're sort of scientists that exist today. They're research scientists, so none of them are practitioners. They just research and publish their research, but they're phenomenal. So maybe you'd like to look in. I love these guys. I would spend my whole day studying. The governments have started taking action. It's just that it's not all governments yet, right? So what they're saying, and I'll sort of conclude here, is they say that wireless technology is the cigarettes of the last century. So what they're expecting is for causality to be proved in the same way that it was for asbestos, and for it to be the rise of the next sort of like tidal wave of litigation, which is why governments like Switzerland, France, Germany, Cyprus, Israel, India have started to limit the damage, because it starts to stem some of the cases and the issues we'll have to deal with later in the day. To be honest, I think one of the reasons why we haven't seen it universally yet is, honestly, I don't know whether this is just me wanting to be naive and like believe in the best in people, but I actually think it's a lack of awareness. I don't think that the information is out there enough yet. They say, although I'm not a cynic, but they say that one of the main reasons why is that the telecoms industry is the strongest lobbyist. So it's just not where they want to put their money. But I think it says something that so many of the countries in the developed world have started to take mitigation. Okay, I think I'm done, right?
Thank you very much. That was very informative. At least for me, maybe many of you know about bioenergy or have heard about it, but you know, it's always in the back of my mind, and I always want to know more about it. And such opportunities are amazing, because it gives us the chance to really like dig deep, and especially for someone that has done the research and done the readings, and bringing us really value out of it. So thank you very much for that wonderful speech. And I guess many of us are wondering, the references that you mentioned, I think they can be shared, right? And I don't know also about the presentation. Okay, so probably we can share it by WhatsApp group, and we also have an Instagram page, so we can also post it there. And I also would like to add that we are also filming this speech on YouTube, so it's live streamed, plus it's going to be there for your reference. And we can add in the description or in the comments the presentation and any more details that you would like to add. So.